The Rotting Monster. In the spring of 2013, a violent storm battered the coast of New Zealand, and after the dark and stormy night passed, a strange beast was left washed ashore in the Bay of Plenty. The rotting carcass seriously disturbed the locals because nobody could figure out what it was. The ghoulish remains measured 30 feet long, with the creature having the face of a long-toothed monster. It looked like a deep ocean predator with huge fangs, yet it also appeared to have flippers like a dolphin. The creature was found partially buried in the sand, and although it resembled a prehistoric beast, experts said it was likely the carcass of a killer whale, but others suggested it may have been the body of an enormous moray eel or even a saltwater crocodile. The one thing everybody agreed on was that the creature must have been attacked while in the water. Something viciously mauled the animal before it washed ashore. If it really was a 30-foot-long eel or a killer whale, it makes you wonder what even bigger creature could have possibly hunted it. Roman treasure. It was just another day at the beach for a lifeguard in central Italy when he accidentally became an amateur archaeologist. A beachgoer came across some suspicious jars while taking a walk along a beach in the city of Latina. It was a hot day, the sun was shining and the sea was crystal clear, and right there in the sand was a jar that looked extremely old. The beachgoer then told the lifeguard about what they'd found. The lifeguard was only 19 years old, but he agreed to inspect the jar. It was clearly an ancient artifact, something from the days of Rome. The lifeguard then extracted the jar from the sand and called the Coast Guard. And as it turned out, the artifact was an ancient amphora, a type of jar used to transport wine and oil. Amphorae were used to hold all kinds of materials during the time of the Roman Empire. They'd be shipped on merchant vessels across the Mediterranean, and they were typically filled to the brim with exotic goods. But how did this one end up randomly on the beach? Experts think it likely washed ashore during the nighttime hours. It was perfectly preserved with not so much as a crack on it. It's unclear exactly how old it is, but it at least dates back roughly 2 millennia. Too much yuck. During the summer of 2023, tourists at a beach in Ibiza were forced to go somewhere else after something disgusting was found in the water. The party was brought to an end when experts identified high levels of fecal matter in the water at the beach. Specifically, the tests were done in the water of the cove where tourists go swimming, and according to local news outlet Diario de Ibiza, the tests were completed by the local council. Playa Pinay Beach was found to contain amounts of fecal matter way above ordinary safety limits. Swimming in water that contains too much fecal matter increases the risk of a lot of different kinds of infections. You can get E. coli infections and intestinal bacterial infections, and those who swim in contaminated water can suffer from things like stomach cramps and bloody diarrhea. Even a brief swim can result in fever, chills, and vomiting. Tourists flew across the world to swim in the cove, only to find that it was full of human waste. So, in a nutshell, the tourists were not happy. You're likely wondering how such a popular tourist beach with such beautiful scenery and pristine water ends up infected like this. The city council never did explain why there was so much human waste in an area where there shouldn't be any. Could it be that tourists were going to the bathroom in the water so much that the whole cove became polluted? It's definitely a possibility, but it would make sense that it has more to do with sewage getting into the area. In New York, for example, over half the beaches in the state are consistently contaminated by fecal matter and sewage. Big shout out to Carol Bohr for the super thanks. Thank you so much for watching and supporting OE. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. The Goddess. Lydia Mana, a 74-year-old resident of the city of Lod in Israel, was walking along the beach with her husband in 2023. They were at Parmashim Beach, which is located just south of Tel Aviv. A storm passed about a month before and left in its wake a small object partially buried in the sand. Lydia spotted the mysterious object and released it from its sandy prison, and she was shocked to see it was a small carved statuette. It almost looked like a piece of a board game, but Lydia had a hunch that it was something far more interesting. After the discovery, Lydia contacted a few of her friends who were knowledgeable in archaeology. However, they told her to contact the Israel Antiquities Authority, which she did through their Facebook page. A couple of investigators were then sent to inspect the object. And sure enough, Lydia had managed to stumble across an artifact from 3,000 years ago. The small statuette was a figurine of Hathor, the Egyptian goddess of fertility and wisdom. According to expert Amir Galani, who specializes in the Bronze Age, The artifact likely didn't originate in Egypt. Instead, he believes it was crafted by the biblical Canaanites. They were notorious for adopting the ritual customs of the Egyptians, who basically ruled the world 3,000 years ago. The small ritual figurine would have been placed on a mantle somewhere in a house. It would have been used as a good luck charm to protect the family from malicious spirits and curses. The figurine itself has a simple construction. It was made of clay and delicately carved into the likeness of the goddess. Amir Galani said, "Hathor is always recognizable by her hairstyle, with her hair shaped to look like bull horns. Giant creature of the deep." In the Philippines, a giant deep-sea creature was discovered washed ashore on the beach. The creature was an oarfish, a marine animal that's so rarely spotted that it's become something of a myth. Whenever these deep-sea animals are found on the shore, locals fear a disaster is right around the corner. Oarfish never really appear in shallow waters, except right before a natural disaster. Typically, oarfish sightings precede significant earthquakes, though it's important to note that this isn't a scientifically established rule. Oarfish have been seen as harbingers of doom for centuries, not only in the Philippines either. Whenever one of them washes ashore in Japan, the country braces for a potential earthquake. According to Japanese seismologist Kiyoshi Waratsumi, oarfish have the ability to detect irregular activities at the bottom of the ocean. Because they live in extremely deep water, they can feel when the ground begins to shift prior to an earthquake. It's like how some people can feel when it's going to rain deep in their bones. And in anticipation of the earthquake, it's believed that the oarfish flee to the surface, and that's when they get washed up on a beach. Sometimes the oarfish do announce an incoming disaster, but not always. Locals in Chile were fearful of an impending earthquake when one of these sea monsters washed ashore in 2022. But it never happened. Two oarfish washed ashore in Mexico within 6 weeks of each other in 2020, but again, there was no earthquake. Many scientists say it's only superstition, and that oarfish on the beach don't mean anything. A lot of people are suspicious, though, believing that all these oarfish could be a sign that the big one is coming, an earthquake that could change the world. The missing mastodon tooth. Jennifer Shue was taking a stroll along the quiet Rio Del Mar State Beach in California in late May 2023 when she came across a tooth. It was no ordinary tooth, but rather a molar from an ancient beast. Jennifer found a mastodon tooth sticking out of the sand, but before she could retrieve it, the tooth disappeared, and it took weeks to find it again. Jennifer didn't immediately take the tooth with her. First, she snapped a photograph of it and posted a picture on Facebook, and that's how Wayne Thompson from the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History saw the picture and reached out to Jennifer. He urged Jennifer to recover it, saying that she'd discovered a molar from an adult Pacific mastodon. He was desperate to get his hands on the tooth, but when they went back to the beach, it was gone. Either someone had found the tooth or the tide had washed it away. Wayne Thomas made a plea on social media, asking whoever may have found the tooth to give him a call. After some time passed and there was no word of the whereabouts of the tooth, it looked like the fossil was going to be gone forever. But then Jim Smith phoned the museum. Jim said that he came upon the tooth after Jennifer took the pictures of it and left it there. Jim regularly jogs along the beach and spotted it sitting in the sand. Unlike Jennifer, though, he took it with him, and when he saw the pleas from Thompson on social media, Jim was good enough to donate the tooth to the museum. Tests were done on the tooth, and while the exact age of it is unknown, it's said to be less than 1 million years old. Still though, it's an amazing find. If you found an artifact like a mastodon tooth, would you keep it for yourself for your personal collection, or would you turn it into a museum to be studied? Let us know what you would do in the comments below. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. A Viking Relic. 8-year-old Bruno Telema was on a family holiday when he found something amazing lying in the sand on the beach in 2023. The discovery was made on a family's summer vacation on the Swedish island of Gotland. Bruno's parents had just given him a book on fossils, so the whole family had their eyes peeled, hoping they might find something interesting. They didn't discover any ancient bones, but they did find an old belt buckle. Bruno came across a bizarre piece of metal glinting in the sand. He didn't know what it was, but he picked it up and put it in his pocket anyway. Then later that day, Bruno presented the mysterious chunk of metal to his mother. She recognized it as something seriously old, but she didn't know exactly what it was. Luckily though, the family had a relative who works as an archaeologist. They asked the relative about the object, and they even showed it to them over a video call. And amazingly, the relative was astonished to identify the artifact as an ancient Viking belt buckle from around 1200 years ago. Bruno had discovered a piece of metal that was used to hold rolled up a Viking's pants around the year 800 AD. Experts believe the buckle likely came from a grave which may have been destroyed by the tide. But unfortunately, that's about all that's known about this interesting find. Not a jellyfish. On a beach in Oregon, a woman named Pilar French came across what she thought was a jellyfish. The Portland native was strolling along Cannon Beach with her dogs when she found the gelatin-like thing. She poked it with her foot and it jiggled like a mass of jello. She thought it was kind of cool, so Pilar took a picture of the alleged jellyfish and posted it on social media. Then she kept on going with her day. Pilar never expected that what she'd just poked with her foot may have been something significantly more disgusting than a jellyfish. Tiffany Booth from the Seaside Aquarium had her doubts about the mysterious object's identity. According to Tiffany, the squishy blob likely wasn't a jellyfish at all. It made more sense to her that the thing was an internal organ from a dead whale. In January, just before Pilar found the mystery blob, a whale washed ashore and died in the area. It was a sperm whale that measured about 40 feet long that had been hit by a ship and killed. Tiffany thinks the squishy mass of gunk may have been part of that whale's stomach. Pilar thought she'd found a jellyfish, but really she was playing footsie with the stomach of a whale. Let this be a warning that if you find something gooey and gross on the beach, don't touch it. Daytona Beach Shipwreck. On the shore of Daytona Beach, something amazing appeared in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Nicole. In April 2023, a potential shipwreck was revealed in the shallow water off the coast of Florida. A witness named Sean Perdue snapped photographs of a strange dark shape in the greenish water shortly after the storm. And around the same time, beachcombers using metal detectors began to find loose metal objects, pieces of old copper, and other remnants of an ancient ship. A local news helicopter flew over the site to get a better look, and sure enough, they found the obvious outline of a shipwreck. It was easily identifiable, as it couldn't have been anything else. This was an awesome discovery because a few months earlier, in November 2022, a different shipwreck was revealed on the shore near Frank Rendon Park. An archaeological team identified the wooden hull as being crafted sometime in the 1800s. Then, in April of the next year, an entirely different shipwreck was found on Daytona Beach. Nobody knows the name of the ship or when it was built. It appears to be about 30 feet long, with little left of it except some scraps of timber. The shipwreck found in November was rapidly reburied in the sand, and this newer shipwreck will undoubtedly face the same fate. Archaeologists say if they try to move it, the shipwreck would likely break into fragments. Mysterious space debris. At the end of summer 2023, a curious object was discovered on a remote beach in Australia. The object was metallic in nature, almost looking like a giant cooking pot. It was clearly a piece of debris, but from what? Many people speculated that it was a piece of the Malaysia Airlines plane that vanished in 2014, but others suggested it was a piece of alien technology that had dislodged from a spaceship. Either of those options would have been really cool, but they didn't turn out to be the truth. After an investigation, the Australian Space Agency announced that the object was a piece of debris from a space vehicle. More specifically, it was a piece of debris from the third stage of an Indian rocket. The object was first reported by a civilian who discovered it near Green Head, a small coastal town with less than 300 residents. The discovery came after India successfully launched a rocket at the moon. It was most definitely a piece left over from India's Polar satellite launch vehicle. The object was then picked up and put into storage, and it's expected to be shipped back to India in the near future. There's a global agreement that any recovered space debris is shipped directly back to the country that owned it, and this has been going on since the 1960s. It isn't even that weird to find orbital debris in random places. According to NASA, the US Department of Defense tracks about 27,000 pieces of space debris at any given time. What many people don't know is that right now there are over 23,000 pieces of debris from rockets and vehicles floating around in Earth's orbit. What's the craziest thing you've ever come across at the beach? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.